I want to talk about an announcement that I'm super pumped for you that you recently made, but BizzyCar, you raised $15 million. So our favorite dealer turned founder has raised a $15 million round from Dealer Tire. Can you just tell us what the hell are you doing? And please preface it with what you're actually doing, because I realize some listeners have not heard you before on the pod. So I do want to give them a little context.
Yeah, we're thrilled. Lots of great data from Q3, but yeah, the capital raise has been awesome. This has been a long road, and all of a sudden success seems to happen overnight. That's just not the way it looks, or it's the way it looks, but it's not the way on the inside. So we're $30 million raised to date, but we've been kind of quiet about it until now. And Dealer Tire is just awesome, and couldn't be happier with them joining as our partner.
Incredible. And then very simply put, like, what problem are you solving for the industry?
Yeah. Big picture, 70 million cars on the road today with an open recall. What's 1 out of every 4 cars driven by consumers today. So if there's thousands, if there's 10,000 people watching this today, 2,500 of them have something wrong with their car that the manufacturer legally has to fix. So huge problem, a problem that's not going away anytime soon. And as you mentioned earlier, we've recalled millions and millions of cars this year on top of millions last year. And our solution helps fix that. We make it easy for consumers to get recalls repaired.
I think I should do a separate podcast just for the conversation before the podcast. Because I swear to God, it's always like some of the best conversations, but I always feel compelled to like bring it into the conversation or to press record early because I'm like, I want that recorded. All right. So you were mentioning just someone that you and I happen to both know who's not in the industry that listened to your prior pod with us. And I was about to tell you, and I stopped myself and said, wait, you know what? Let's record this. But anyways, I was mentioning to you that the way I measure success with our content is how far out of the industry does it permeate, right? Like, let me explain this. If I put up a podcast, a video, a tweet, newsletter, and I have like a friend reach out to me about it, my friends do not care about the car business. I'm like, yes. I'm like, that's it. Like, I got it. Like, if this piece of content was understandable, interesting, and good, that people that do not give a shit about cars gave a shit about it, I'm like, that is success. And that's a good quality piece of content because it was simple enough that anyone can understand, but it was also interesting and likely taught you something. So that was my answer to you. I was like, when you mentioned that, I was like, that puts a smile on my face to know that this person listened to your podcast because they have nothing to do with the car business. And that just makes me happy. So that's my answer.
That is, I completely understand that. I mean, we talk about recalls all day at BizzyCar, and during our round, I mean, we had people from New York, San Francisco, we had people from Europe reach out to us. It was crazy. So you're reaching a global audience at this point.
I love to hear it. I actually want to start with the brass tacks, which is your recall report that you just put out. And we'll talk more about everything else in the fundraise. But talk to us about just some of your findings. I did look through the entire report that you recently pulled out and some really good insights there. Again, for context, for anyone listening, BizzyCar puts out these reports, obviously quarterly, and we are linking them in the show notes below. So you can just see a direct link down there below. But Ryan, just get us kickstarted a little bit. Like, give us the high level of what is the purpose of this report? What are some findings that you've uncovered here?
Yeah. So as a car dealer, I'm a third generation dealer. This is a problem that we've been trying to tackle for years. And I really became interested in this during the Takata airbag recall, which, believe it or not, there's still millions of those airbags floating around. If you have a Takata airbag, you need to get it repaired. It is something that is very dangerous. It could kill you. There have been deaths from those airbags exploding in people's cars. So we really want to try and help solve and get those airbags repaired. Last year, we recalled over 30 million vehicles in the United States. Just through the first 3 quarters of this year, we've recalled 20 million cars. So huge number of cars on the road today where the manufacturer says, hey, we got to touch your car, or we got to reach out to your vehicle and do something about it. And in Q3, so which just closed about 10 days ago, we recalled 6.5 million cars in Q3. So a lot of interesting statistics in here. The biggest thing is we separate recalls into different segments, if you will. The ones that you hear about the most on the nightly news are the ones that are really dangerous, right? And those are typically your do not drive recalls. They impact about 0.1% of all of the recalled vehicles year to date. So a small number. And then the other ones that you typically hear about are an OEM goes on television and says, hey, don't park your car in your garage. The car will burn down, or the battery could light on fire and burn it down. And those park outside recalls has gone from 14% to 3%. I'm in this industry. You're in this industry. We want to see the manufacturers succeeding and bringing cars to market that don't have recall. So I would say overall, year to date, we're seeing an improvement in the industry in the terms of vehicles that are getting recalled.
Is this counterintuitive, right? Because if I think you've created a platform here, right? You mentioned that you come from a family of dealership, you own dealerships, and it's like the more recalls, the more money that dealers can make in theory. Is that right? Like, is this sort of counterintuitive that it's, go ahead.
Yeah. Is there a perverse incentive? It's kind of tricky. When these recalls get announced, it's sometimes weeks or even months before you can actually do anything about the recalls. For your audience that may not know how this works, the federal government actually dictates these recalls. It's through an entity called NHTSA, the National Highway Transport Safety Administration. That falls under the Department of Transportation. And they actually mandate this. These car manufacturers are required by federal law to get these recalls repaired. But the problem the manufacturers have, and this was super interesting for me, I didn't really know, but even as a car dealer, I did not know this. These car manufacturers, when they do the recall, they're not always manufacturing the parts that are needed to repair that recall. So I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a fuel pump recall. So something where your car is going down the road and something goes wrong with the fuel pump and it could stop the engine, right? That's dangerous when you're driving 60 miles an hour on the highway. The car manufacturers don't make just extra parts. That's too expensive for them. That would cost them millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. And so they make just enough parts for that production run. And so when there's a recall, it's super frustrating for consumers to have to wait weeks or months, right? They get the letter in the mail and they forget about it. And so your question about, is there money to be made? Sure, the manufacturers reimburse the dealers for that recall to get repaired, but the consumers sometimes are not happy about it. And they have to go to the dealership and they have to do this. Fixing that overall issue is top of mind for the manufacturers. But yes, car dealers do get paid to get these recalls repaired. And it's good margin work for them, but it's not as good as you bring your car in for a standard repair.
People have fewer savings to spend and whatnot. The service department is the one area in the dealership that's always constrained, right? Do dealers actually have that capacity to take in a lot more recall work?
Yeah, so it's a tough part of the industry, not having enough capacity, and that's usually limited by technicians. Do you have enough people to actually turn the wrenches? And that is a huge issue in our industry, technician shortage. So which correlates directly with capacity. Then you have some dealers that do have enough people, but they don't have enough service bays in their stores. Either they're landlocked or they're in an area where they just can't expand. And there's some huge opportunities there for additional service opportunities, mobile service, pick up and drop off. So there's some cool things we can talk about. As far as capacity goes, I mean, when COVID ended and when we were trying to fix that glut, I mean, I was booked out 6, 8, 10 weeks in my stores. And that sucks for the consumers. That's just not a good customer experience. They want to get this stuff repaired, but I think you're starting to see capacity level. And I think the way that we should look at recalls today is think about them as a hook.
It's like the Trojan horse, right? It's how you get the customer in the door.
We don't want to use this like nefarious thing to bring the consumer back in, but it's a fantastic opportunity to get the consumer back in the store, because many of these consumers, they've moved on, right? They've gone to a mom and pop service center, but the only place where you can get a recall repaired is a franchise car dealership. And we want to help facilitate that process.
It's incredible. If you look at the brands with the most recalls, and let's exclude Tesla for a second, who came out number one because those are all completed via over-the-air updates, which that's a whole nother conversation on its own. Like, I think that should be classified differently. Do you agree, disagree with that?
Yeah, OTAs are in order to do a fully comprehensive over-the-air update, OTA, you need to have a vehicle that has a true SD, software-defined architecture. That's Tesla. So that they are in a unique capacity. It's like Apple, right? There's something wrong with the phone, they do a software update. Everybody gets it. It's simple. But that is not the case for the rest of the manufacturers in this industry.
So the point I was trying to make is that excluding Tesla, who comes in at number one, right? Chrysler. And it's just like, it feels like management is making just bad decisions across the board. In like, when you look at Chrysler, plagued by high prices where they overpriced their vehicles, right? Many Stellantis dealers have had their fair share of challenges here. Now, 25% market share of recalls in Q3. That's astronomical. That's nearly 3 times GM, nearly almost 4 times Ford. So like, what's happening with Chrysler?
Yeah. So some of these, you're spot on. Stellantis, number one recalled vehicle this last quarter. BMW and General Motors were the next two. And
yes, BMW is correct.
And what's the challenge? One of the things that we are seeing is that there are a lot of additional vendors and suppliers that are a part of these ecosystems where some of these challenges need to be met head on. Now, I'm not in the manufacturing space, so what is it that's causing some of these challenges? There's a lot of assembling that goes on in these car manufacturers, right? They're not actually building these cars, they're assembling them, right? That's why we call them assembly plants. And when you bring in hundreds or thousands, like when we work with Ford, we work with GM, we work with Stellantis, that's a new announcement from our end. So now if you're a Stellantis dealer, we're fully integrated into their platform, and they're working with tens of thousands of vendors and subcontractors. It's complicated. And what is it that's causing this? Sometimes it's just cross-functional friction. You have a vendor that's importing a part that was manufactured and designed maybe in a different country, different continent, and then it gets here and it all has to work perfectly. And that's not always the case because these cars are complicated and they drive on the road and the roads have potholes and they're bumpy. And there's definitely some complications to solving this issue.